I didn't get to Ironman Kona overnight. I won't understand racism and social justice overnight either.
Right.
And I don't
Yeah.
know if
No,
I'll
absolutely.
ever understand it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, so with that, I mean, we can absolutely go into it. I understand your view. So your view of it and perspective. And so just kind of a little background, Anthony Skinner, I'm going to plug in my phone. Been on it all day.
Yeah.
I work
Yeah.
I'm a chief technical officer at a company called iSpot. And so we do really media measurement for TV ads or ads in general. So not just TV, local linear TV or national. We also do it for streaming services as well. And so largely do that for many of large brands or really anyone that advertises on TV. We also work with all the networks and all the movie studios. And so I don't know of any at this point. We really don't work with on the network and movie studio side, but brands, we're still making our way into it. We have a large swath of folks, and so this company has been growing. It's been exciting, fast, and so a lot of us, a good portion of that company, has worked together before at previous companies, and then even from there, people have brought in other folks they know, and so really, it's kind of a big family. So from that aspect, of course, being at home kind of sucks because we all knew each other and hung out all the time, but we still all call each other. So that's fun as well. So that's really my background. Again, three boys, 19, 17, and 11. So yeah, and only one girlfriend. So that was a joke. That's
hilarious. So, that's
yeah,
all you need.
Yeah. That's all I need. Yeah. So it's great. She works for NASA, so it's fun.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the background.
That's Anthony, who you are, what you do.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So you and I have been having a conversation via direct messages on Instagram. We've emailed each other. I've talked to a whole bunch of other friends just about, how I can educate, how I can learn, how I can become aware of racism, even though I'm aware of it, but I think it's at a higher level of awareness, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about like what you've dealt with as a human.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a good question. So it's a little bit funny because I grew up in a small town in Washington State. So that town is probably at the time was maybe 26,000 people. Two other cities next to us that were contiguous and they're about the same. And so I think there was a celebration at the point in time we had 100,000 people. It's bigger now. It's really known for its wine. And so where I grew up, the wineries were in my backyard. And so kind of just grew up in that space. But there was a lot of people that worked for the government. And so the education level is fairly high in those cities, right? Because many of those people were engineers. And so we kind of lived in this unique space where there was certainly racism, but as far as it being really prevalent, not as much as when I was growing up. Sure, my parents grew up, but not as much for me, right?
Sure.
Also, in my time, so a lot of sports. I played a lot of sports, and so you're kind of known for sports as well. So you're in the papers for sports. People knew you for sports, and it was a small town. I had uncles who played pro basketball, baseball, or whatever, right? For the Sonics or the Knicks, and so of course I didn't get any of their size, but so they're pretty well known. And so from that aspect, we were, tiny bit of a bubble. And so did we see it? Yes. Did you see a ton? No. And in fact, many of my friends today, even from elementary school, I actually still know and talk to. And so there's like 10 or 12 of us in a group chat and we talk every single day. And so it's just kind of this unique spot. Sure, did we have racism? Yes. But the way my family took it was, hey, look, they didn't talk about it a ton. They really took a different approach. They said, look, is it out there? Sure. However, we fought for you to get to this point, and so all we want you to do is go be an American. Not African-American, not anything else, just an American. Go. And that's kind of how they treated it, right? And so if it came up, sure, we talked about it, but you just moved on. And there was a time I remember I was playing basketball, I got off the court and I said, Dad, I think he's not playing me. I think he's a racist. And so that was really the time my dad kind of laid into it. He's like, look, never levy that word onto someone unless you actually fully know, right? Because it's a pretty powerful word.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is perhaps you're just not good. And so he's like, look, if I watch from the outside, he played you, but you were only using your right hand. The guy cut your right hand off. You didn't have a left. So maybe you need to go work on your left. And so all night we just spent time doing that for the next weeks, right? And so that was just one of those things where I sat back and said, oh, okay, got it, right? And so it's just one of those things from our perspective, we didn't really use it, right? And so it was one of those things where my dad said, look, a lot of times where that comes from, and my mom as well, it was simply someone was unaware. Perhaps they don't know anyone like you. And what my father used to always say is, hey, there's just a lot of stupid people in the world. And so, but 99.9% of the people are good. So focus on that, right? And so,
love it.
And that's kind of how we really grew up. And so that's the focus that was the focus, the impetus behind kind of how we lived. And so sure it was out there, but we just didn't spend a ton of time looking at or pretending, right? And so I know there was times where there's a local shop, or not even local, everyone knows it, J.C. Penney's, right, was a place. And so my father and mom would take me and my two sisters to school shop. And it was a thing we did every year in the summer. My dad would drive, he'd buy one car and drive it forever. So
right.
At one point, he's driving a 68 GTO and just drop us off. Finally, I think he upgraded to a 79 Lincoln. He literally drove that through college, right? Through us out of college. But that was his deal. We pulled up in one of these cars. He'd take us. I think we had $150. We'd go in and shop.
Right.
My sisters and I were always like, man, we're being watched, right? And so it was just one of these things. You're in J.C. Penney's. You didn't really want to be there anyway because all the cool kids were shopping at the Bon Marché, but yet you're stuck in J.C. Penney's.
Right.
And we were being watched, right? It was just one of those times for me. That was really probably the first time like it triggered that going into a store. You're going to be watched or perceived differently, right? And so, which is kind of weird because we shop there all the time as kids. So it's just a little bit weird. I think my father never really went in there because he was kind of the bigger guy side, like 6'3", 250, big guy. So all of his suits were made, right? So he had them all custom made. So he never went to JCPenney. He just dropped us off and said, go, right? And so it was just one of those times I know my sister and I, and even to this day, I won't walk into a JCPenney's. And so it's one of the times I said, I'm going to work my ass off, never to have to shop here. And so it's just always kind of, that's one of those things that, we did face, kind of head on. And my sisters did as well. And yeah, to this day, none of us shop there. And so I guess no one will be shopping there at this point, but
right.
That was just one of those things where, that's where you're hit with some racism, or perhaps, as my dad would call it, stupidity, and lack of understanding, as though we were going to steal from JCPenney's when, we had the cash to buy. And so, at some point he did let us go to Lamont's, I think it was. And so, he's like, okay, you can go to Lamont's. And so we went there and we shopped. But that was one of the times where I think it was one of those things that's a little bit blatant. So, so there was some of that, but we just, we didn't have a ton in Washington. Do we have it? Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit more overt, and you're not going to see just a ton of it. And so you're kind of sitting in this weird little bubble. I think for me, and we can get to the cycling piece of it as well. And so we'll kind of move into that where oddly, when I saw it more and I see it more is with my kids. And so my kids actually went to private schools and really didn't go to public school until kind of late middle school to high school. And it was only for a small portion of time. And my kids would come home and they'd come home with all these slurs, and they would ask me what they meant. And it wasn't directed towards them. It was usually towards Southeast Asians. And so, and they'd kind of ask, like, what the hell do these mean? Because it's just not something we use in the home. And so, like, some of them I had to go look at myself. I'm like, oh, I don't know. And so I said, let me go find out. And so, we'd talk about it. And I said, look, hey, these are slurs, clearly, but realize these really aren't your friends, because if they're saying these things about others, they're certainly saying them about you. So you turn your back, right? And so, so that was just one of those things we kind of had to walk through and figure out. And one time my oldest, the 19-year-old, and I don't use the term N-word. I actually just use the word because it's actually more powerful to me. I think once you say the N-word, it kind of just cleanses the actual word. But so he he was called a nigger inside of the school. He was in, I think, 9th or 10th grade. He was called this by a senior football player.
Okay.
And he just said, okay, well, I had enough. And he's kind of a big kid as well. So if you take more on my dad and mom's side, they're all bigger people. So he's like, all right, well, I guess we're going to do something about this that day. So he's like, all right, let's go. And so he's like, I don't care if you play football. I don't care if you're a lineman. That's just not a word you're going to call me. And so, yeah, he's like, so from that kind of point on, he's like, not going to take it. And so I pulled him out of that school and put him in a little private school back in Minnesota. And so he loved it. You know, he had great friends there. Knows Duke City. In fact, his principal and the head of the school that actually took him on vacation. They're like a second family to him. So, you know, it's just one of those things where, it was just left this little supposed liberal town where everyone's supposed to be so great and had a great life. So yeah. So same with my middle guy. He was at that school. He really had the same friends from his elementary private school through part of middle school all the way through high school. They're the same 6 friends. And if you look at it, one's from Algeria. I think the other one's from Morocco. There's one from India. So they're just like this eclectic group. Some of them play soccer, some don't, some rap, some whatever. But they've been friends forever, and they just stayed that way. So, you know, he kind of heard the same things. And so, you know, it's really hard for him too, just because his girlfriend is actually from South Korea. So he's like, I just don't get it. So, so they just kind of been pulled out of that environment. So sure. I actually had more of those guys than when I was growing up. So sorry.
Yeah, no. But to me, it sounds like you were brought up how you were brought up, but you did the same thing with your boys, your sons. Like, you're like, this is how I'm going to deal with it. And I'm going to teach you the same.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of been that way. And for us, so, you know, backing up when I was growing up, my father, you know, his family was, they grew up on the poorer side. And so what he always talked about is during Christmas, actually, they never had a Christmas where they had gifts with their names on it, right? It was always boy number 6. And so for him, it was all about always just giving back or doing something or going to get gifts for boy number 6 because he used to be that person. So I did that all the way through all my life, really. And I still do it, right? Because he did that. So we still go down and we go to the tree and we get all the gifts and make sure someone has a gift. But just so we try to do things. And even like now during the whole pandemic thing, it's with the kids, it's always been about, can we give or help someone else? Sure. And so we try to do it from that perspective, like, hey, let's not be judgmental. Let's do the best we can. Let's help others. Right. And so one of the things we always talked about is as we're going through these times is, and people talk about privilege. I said, look, there's really 2 types of this, right? So you have to bifurcate it. There's the case where you have someone who can walk out on the street or have a interaction with the cop, it will likely go well, right? Whereas if you're Black, perhaps that's a different story. So that's a privilege. Now there is a privilege also when you have the ability to essentially have, let's call it money that's been flowed down from your family and others, right? And you're just in a position that's going to be better than the next person. And so we talked about just that side of it as well, right? And so, sure, there's privilege there. And so that's something as an individual you can't necessarily help, right? And so it's not a bad thing. The question is, what do you do with it, right?
Right.
And so, and that's where we've always kind of said, hey, look, sure, everyone's going to have something, but what can you do with it, right? And so, that's kind of the perspective I've been taking with those guys and just walking through, at least my boys, and how we're going to deal with it. It's like, hey, fantastic, let's deal with it, right? So my middle guy who, you know, these soccer shoes, I don't know if you have any, like these synthetic leather shoes. Well, we live in the Northwest. As soon as they get wet, they reek. And so I like usually bag them up and put it in the back of the car. Now I can drive, so it's not a big of a deal. So as soon as they get super bad, I would let them in the house and I'll just replace them. But we were at a place where he was going to go pick up a pair. And we were there, and a kid was there with his mom, and Black kid, and she was going to buy him some shoes, and they weren't like the top end shoes, right? And then I said, look, Max, we're going to get him shoes. So here's what we're going to do. And he asked me, like, why would you do this? Because I wouldn't get him the top end shoes because I like $300 shoes. You're not blinking getting those things. I don't even wear those. Right. But I bought them for that other kid. He's like, I don't get it. I said, well, you'll get it eventually. Right.
Yeah.
And so, so it was just literally, I mean, he was probably 11 at that time. So 17 now. It was just the other day he walked to me. He said, okay, I get it. Right. And I said, there you go. Right. So it's just one of those things where you go, okay, finally. Like, you know what it's like to be out there and not have the best. And certainly I won't always buy you the best stuff. So you know what it's like. People will make fun of you. So in this case, it was your opportunity to help him, and I had him go do it. And so, because they're both playing soccer, they're into it. He could talk to him about the shoes. And so it was just one of those things where it's that little stuff you can do to kind of help them along. And so I said, look, you had the privilege to do that, and that was one thing for you. And then there's my kid playing Xbox back there, clearly not doing his homework. But it's that privilege. Can someone else do those same types of things to help others, right? And as soon as we get there and to that point, that's when this overall system will be better. So I rambled. I don't know if that all makes sense.
No, this makes sense. I love it. I love it. So the reason why we connected, you're a cyclist, I'm a triathlete, you know, it's that endurance space. And so, you know, I reached out to my platform and just said, hey, I need athletes to talk to about what you've dealt with, it, you know, whether it's the triathlon space, whether it's a cycling space. So we saw, you know, you shared with us about the racism in everyday life, what you see with your boys. Now share with me and share with us what you see in the endurance world, in the cycling world, if you see anything.
Yeah, the cycling world's different. I always said it's for the people there, it becomes the revenge of the tuba player, right? Because it was really that endurance athlete who ran, did cross country, probably was in, and I'm stereotyping, so I get it, but it probably was in band, right? And so those are the types that were usually the better ones at this naturally, right? And that wasn't me. I didn't come to endurance. I only came to it because I couldn't run anymore, right? Because of my knees. And so I moved to biking.
Yep.
And I refused for a long time to ride the trainer. Like, I'm not riding that blanking thing inside, not doing it. So it just wasn't fast. Of course, when it got out of, I wouldn't get fast until the end of summer. So finally I had to buckle down. But started training, got a little faster. And as soon as you get out there and you're riding, there's probably not a time where there won't be a comment like, hey, you look like a sprinter, or, there's always some comment, right? You look like a sprinter, or you're probably not the fastest, or, oh, hey, nice bike. Is that really going to work well on the blah, right? And it's just one of those things it's in cycling. I don't even know if they're aware of it when they're saying these things, right? Or how it could be perceived, but it's just one of those things underlying that's there. That being said, some of my best friends as of late are those I've been riding bikes with, right? So we've gone to races, we've met, we've showed up to fondos or something, right? And we just all stayed in touch. And so there is that side of it as well. But the cycling world is definitely different. There's, like I said, there's always going to be a comment about the way you look or how you look on your bike. And look, in general, that's kind of cycling altogether, right? And so regardless of race, it's just there. You add race to it, and it's just one more thing to comment on, right? So for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I and I don't know if I shared this with you, but I lived in Gulfport, Mississippi for 2 years, and one of my best friends was Vernon, still one of my dearest friends. You know, I was always trying to get him to do triathlons, and he's like, Jen, I got the bike and the rundown. Like, let's figure something else out. So we found a triathlon, and the triathlon was it was paddling, and then we ran, and then we biked. But he's just like, I don't swim. I'm not comfortable swimming. But we would be out training, and you know, you're in Mississippi, and you know, we got cans thrown at us, and I couldn't understand why. And I remember asking him, and he's like, well, did you see that Confederate flag on there? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, that's why, you know, he's like, they just don't like seeing me out here. And I'm like, what? That makes me so, like, once again, that makes me sad. And going back to my original question, why are people so mean?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And good on Vernon, because there are places that I absolutely will not ride for that very reason.
Really?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The last thing I need to do is be out in the middle of nowhere with this big ass 4x4 and his big mirrors who can accidentally hit me, right?
Yes.
So, no, I want it. So if you look at kind of my heat map, I ride where there's people with a lot of money, right? Because they have insurance, they're not likely to hit me, and because if they do, right, they lose a lot. So
right.
It's just, so certainly there can be mistakes and all those things can happen, but they're not going to intentionally hit you. And it's kind of, this is a true story. So I ride with a few others. We'll always do our local loops. We stay in the places where there's a lot of wealth. There's still a lot of hills and stuff, and you can have some variety, but screw going out in the country, not going to have it. But I can almost tell you within probably 96% of the time, when there's a woman behind us, when there's an Asian woman behind us, and when there's kids. And you can almost, without a doubt, just by how long they're going to be behind you. And so as you know, you're on the bike, you always say, car back or whatever, right?
Yep.
And we just kind of laugh. We can go, oh, yeah, that's the mom. So she'll be in an SUV. And you can just tell about how long they're going to be back there. And that's typically where we stay, because they'll stay back there and just kind of leave you there. And it's just kind of funny because it's a stereotype, and you can call it stupidity or racism as well on my side. But there's a lot of moms in some of those places, especially Asian moms. They will stay behind you forever, almost like to protect you and just let you ride.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
Oh, that's great.
Traffic just build up and let you go. And so we always laugh. We're like, I know who that is behind me. We're good for like the next 10 miles. Just go. And so it's kind of funny that way, but that's kind of how it is here. So there's a lot of that, but yeah, absolutely. There's places, I won't go. So so I get it. So,
these moms are actually protecting you guys. I like it. So there is goodness in the world.
Absolutely do. It's just kind of funny. It's you will know. You can kind of know, and you also know when there's kids, and so you can tell the ones who learn from their parents, they'll do it for a little bit, and then they'll go speeding past you 2 lanes over, right, to give you space. But so you can always kind of know just kind of how long they're back there and what they're doing and who's in that car. So we kind of laugh about it. So absolutely. So
what
sure. But
like, so moving forward, like I told you, like I can't, took me 28 years to get to Kona. I don't think I'm ever going to understand what y'all have gone through, all that stuff. But and talking to my girls, they were like, just open your heart, open your voice, share, educate yourself. Is there any books that you suggest or podcasts that might help people out about racism? I don't know. Like, I know there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of noise out there too. So
so for me, I think so. It's a good question. So I didn't answer your first question of why people are stupid and
or why they're mean.
Why they're mean, or why they're mean. That's it. I said stupid. Why they're mean. So let's answer that one, then I'll come back to the second one. So why they're mean. Look, I think people are always mean, but I think now what we have is the leaders of our country, right? They're mean. They don't work together. And so that reverberates through our whole system. And if you remember back in the day, at least when I was growing up, the difference between Republicans and Democrats were essentially based upon how big the government was going to be and how are you going to pay for things, right? Not as though things should not be in place to help others, but it was how were you going to pay for it and what percentage of essentially your paycheck went into paying for it, right? And that was the main difference. It was this fiscal responsibility, right? And so, and you remember the days where Clinton and others are in office, you'd always have the VP go down and they'd negotiate, and they'd come across with this great budget. On one side it's great, and the other side it sucked, right? It just depends on what side you're on.
Right.
No longer exists, right? It doesn't exist anymore. And so the civility is no longer there. And so you essentially have a place where it's no longer civil, and we also have platforms that allow it to happen, right? And
Yeah.
which, well, I basically stay off of Twitter because there's nothing,
Yes.
like I could tweet the most thing about technology. There's always some dickhead who's got to say something, right? It's
Right.
always there. Excuse my language, but it's
Oh,
just
please.
there. Right. So it's a platform I stay off. It's a platform that if they wanted to manage it, they actually could and make it useful
Right.
for everyone, but that's not what they've done. And so you take that and you just kind of roll it out. We have a place where you can hide behind a keyboard. You can say whatever you want. You have the president who will tweet whatever he wants.
Right.
And usually in all caps. And so as people are empowered to do so, right? And so it's one of those things. And so I think it's always been there, but now we have a way for people to put it on their keyboard or his or her keyboard and not be accountable for it. And so you have it from the top. You have people that can say whatever he or she wants. You combine that, and that's where we are today. So it certainly was always there. It's just a platform now where people are coming from, right?
Right.
You see it. And so
Right.
yeah. So look, I look, that's my opinion. Again, if I take my dad's approach, his approach would be, look, there's certainly going to be some folks that are going to be like that. There's others, like if you actually got to know him or her, they'd probably changed the tune. So, or his or her tune. So, yeah. So that's, in my opinion, why it's there. Some of it will always be there. I don't believe that people of Mississippi with their Confederate flag will change.
Correct.
Look, I don't know if I
agree with you 100%. Right. And they don't care.
Enjoy your Confederate flag. Yeah, exactly. Fine. So.
Agreed. They don't care. So, they're gonna. That's agreed. And that's what I learned in Mississippi. So, like going from, Michigan to Wisconsin to Minnesota down to Gulfport, I was like, whoa! Like it was just a very eye-opening experience because I didn't recognize that until I got down there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What was my last question? What
were you talking about? What to read and how to learn and what type of suggestions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have any. Yeah.
So, I think for me, I don't know, did you see that little animation that went around about racism, systemic racism, and how that all played out? And they showed a kid who was basically, they had a fence, and there was a white picket fence on one side, there's a set of white kids, on the other side, there's a set of black kids, right? And they tried to explain racism through this little animation. And so, look, it's one of those things that's out there, but I think it's people, if you go back and you look at it, it was a decent attempt. For me, I think where people have to go, for me, if I'm going to suggest how I approached it with my kids, I said, please understand institutional racism. What that's been coined, that's been now co-opted into this systemic racism. But if you look at institutional racism, and inequality, if you read about those things, you can then gain an understanding of the complete picture, right? And so I know for my kids, what hit home was, and I'm happy to just kind of back up all the way through it, but starting with the looters, right? My kids didn't understand it. And I said, look, there's a reason why. And so, look, I said, you don't get it because you're in a place where odds are you're not going to get looked at if you're in a shop. By the way, you can walk into a store and buy something, right? However, if you are a young black kid, let's talk about institutional racism and inequality, right? Mm-hmm. There are kids who will never be able to walk in a store to buy anything. And if they do, that 20-cent bag of having that Nordstrom bag, or I guess Barney's doesn't exist anymore. That dates my shopping. But look, one of those fancy things, bags, it's something that they want to have. It's something that's in wraps, right? It's in the culture, yet it's hard to obtain. And so you have this situation where even if they did go in the store, much like when I was growing up, they would be followed, right? You will be looked at. And so, look, it's one of those things like, well, now we have our time. We can go get this stuff, right? In which they did. Now, is that the justification? Perhaps not. But look, please understand why these types of things go on and where they're actually coming from. And if you understand kind of how that works, it will make more sense. I told the kids, I basically if you look at institutional racism, so my family didn't talk about racism a lot, but there are things that's kind of underneath the kind of how we dealt with life daily, right? And one of those things was, and is, I really never rented anything until now. So I'm in this rental house because my house is being remodeled. It was torn down, built back up. So here I am in my 40s. I never really rented anything. And I said, let me explain to you why. When my parents grew up, in order to get an apartment, they had to have a friend go to make sure that apartment was available. And then once they knew it was available, they could then go apply because they knew it was there, right? And so that's something for them that's always carried with them. So you just never rented. And as a family, wherever you went, you bought something because you weren't going to be allowed to rent. Now, furthermore, odds are if you're Black, someone probably wouldn't even sell to you when they were growing up, right? And so you're going to be put in certain neighborhoods that you could buy in. And so for them, that was the lens of life, right? It was, if you're going to go, we're not renting, you're going to buy. And you're out of college, here's the down payment, you go buy, right? And so, and that's just always kind of the way it's been. And so here I am in my 40s, I'm finally renting something for a period of time while the house is being built. And so I just have to think about that. So understanding institutional racism and how it worked and how it plays into life, understanding racism, right? And then understanding equality. And I think those are really things you have to look at within boxes. And there's tons of places you can go to look at it. And I think as you look at institutional racism and systemic racism and how those two things became conjoined, it's also interesting, right? Because the institutional racism was largely talked about during the Black Power days, right? And so Stokely Carmichael and others, and you notice those words, which were strong words, and Black Power movement, all those words, those things those terms just kind of just fade away. And, we use things like systemic racism instead, right? And so even the history beyond and how those things happen to me are interesting as people read and kind of understand how they work. So really it's kind of understanding that system, how the system works and how it impacts others, right? Sure. And so that's at least where I've tried to educate my kids and have them learn and how they can help others as well, right? And how I can help others.
Yeah. So, but honestly, I didn't know there was institutional or systemic racism. Right. Like you're educating me, and then equality.
Right. So yeah, well, and I think it's one of those things that as people learn, and so that's what was that little cartoon. To go back to the cartoon was driving me crazy. I'm like, look, this isn't really how it works, right? So let's understand how it works, what the wording and terminology is, and why. Yeah. And look at the looters. Look, there's an inequality there. There are some things they'll never have. Now, look, there's no one in this house who will ever have a Birkin bag, and so let's face it, we're not going to have one either. But there's a case where some of these kids and some of the people looting, they just won't have the basics coming out of the store. They don't have the basic food, right? They don't have those things. So for them, they can not only now get something that others have, but perhaps they can even go sell it and make a little bit more and finally just have some of the basics. So it's one of those things. So yeah, absolutely. So for me, that's where I started.
I like it. I like it. And I always, when you talk about Black Power, the Black Power, I always think about Forrest Gump going in and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry." What did he say? I didn't mean to interrupt your Black Panther party. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah,
but
exactly.
That was the Black Power, wasn't it? The Black Panther party with Jenny.
Exactly.
I think.
Yep, exactly. Yes.
I'm like, and that's sad that I get my history from Forrest Gump,
Right. Well, I mean, it's a lot of us, it's comfortable, right? We've been comfortable.
Right.
Before the pandemic, people are pretty much comfortable.
Seriously, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you have something in the next, in a couple minutes. So I just, I wanted to say thank you for jumping on and having a conversation. I mean, that's what this is all about, is just, and, even though I say I'm doing this for my followers and for people that follow me, I'm also doing it for me. It's very much on the selfish side for me. So
Well, look, no, I appreciate it. I think the more we speak up and the more we educate, it will just be better off for everyone altogether.
I agree.
Again, yeah, it's one of those things where, look, I'm not saying Washington's perfect or the Pacific Northwest, but it's a little fraction of a bubble, and so it's a decent life here, and it's one of those things, as at least with my kids, it's like trying to explain what's going on, and just in general how Seattle even works, right? Because it's if you
Right.
as you start reading, it's understanding even how the I-5, the highway, was laid out and how that was done, right? And so there's a history there and how people were moved, and so how those cities were set up and Black people were moved out, and how people came back and started what they
Wow.
call gentrifying, right? And so those things are interesting too. So we definitely have ours. It's not perfect,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. But who wants perfection, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you'll take it.
Sometimes we'll take it. Yeah.
I would.
Well,
Yeah, that's right.
well, thanks, Anthony. I appreciate you. And yeah, let's just keep this conversation going. That's all that matters.
Absolutely. Anytime. No, I appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time and being willing to put the word out there.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll see you for your morning coffee, I'm sure, in a few hours. So.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anthony.
That's right. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.